Милые дети, странные дети, с волчатами вместе бегали в лес, черпали силу в лунном свете.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Good Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Okay, so this afternoon, it's back to whiskey, and I can hear the cheering from miles away. I know that the gin episodes of the show don't tend to get quite as many views as the whiskey episodes, but I would just like to say thank you to all the producers that retweeted my tweet and said nice things about the show. So that was really nice. So thank you. Anyway, so today it's kind of World Whiskey Day on the Good Dram Show, and why not? As you know, I do indeed enjoy whiskies from other parts of the world, and it's funny because I still get customers coming in the shop and I suggest trying the English whiskey for argument's sake, and they kind of look at me blankly and go, "Oh, I didn't know they made whiskey in England." And then you go on to sort of point out that there's whiskey from Sweden and Switzerland and India, and and they're kind of going, "Woohoo!" But that's the whole point. There's a huge, wide world of whiskey out there waiting to be discovered, and some of it is very, very good. And so I thought, well, why not? Let's do another episode of the show. These are all bottles and samples that have come my way over the last sort of couple of months or so. So obviously we're going to be looking at, as you can see, the two bottlings, a peated and an unpeated cask from the English distillery in East Harling. And as you know, I've done several episodes of the show on the distillery, and I'm a big fan of what they're doing. And obviously I don't need to go into too much any detail at all about the distillery. I've said it all before. Also, the same can be said for the Gwalior distillery, or Penderyn in Wales. Again, big fan of what they're doing, and they kindly sent me a couple of samples of their single cask bottlings, which I'm looking forward to sharing with you guys. And again, I've done several episodes of the show on their whiskey, so I don't really need to tell you anything about that particular distillery. The two newish ones, I probably do need to tell you something a little bit about. The first is this one here. This is another Indian malt, and why not? India's producing some great whiskey. I mean, you've got obviously Paul John and Amrut producing some great spirit, and here we have a brand spanking new bottling for the UK market. This is called the Rampur single malt, and it's produced at that distillery, which is owned by a company called Radico, who are, I believe, the fourth largest spirit producer in India. And I believe that India produces more spirit than anywhere else in the world, but the bulk of it is obviously made from either grain or molasses, and is only for the home market, because obviously if you tried to sell it in the UK you wouldn't be able to sell it as single malt, and you know the score. So although the distillery, I believe, has been in production since 1943, I think they only started producing single malt in about 1990, and this year they've decided that they're going to release a bottling of that for the UK and the European market. So obviously they had to make sure it adhered to all the rules and regulations. And we're not talking about a small distillery here, we're talking about a big behemoth of a distillery producing somewhere in the region of 125 million litres of predominantly neutral spirit per year. So, I mean, if you look at the pictures of the distillery, you'll see that their column stills are damn big. That's all I can say. So it's going to be interesting to see quite how this particular bottling stacks up. I believe it's distilled in the usual double distilled in copper pot stills. I did have a wreath of information about the bottling, but as per usual I forgot to bring that home with me, so I'm just going to have to waffle a little bit. But obviously again, the distillery has its own website and information and all that kind of stuff, which you can quite easily find. And the second new bottling is this baby. Now this is the Isford, I think I've pronounced that correctly, Icelandic whiskey, It's not the floky, and no, they never bloody well got back to me, and I really wanted to taste that whiskey, but yeah, well, these things happen, don't they? So anyway, I was kind of intrigued by this particular whiskey, which is allegedly distilled and cut with pristine Arctic water, which seems to be their big selling point, but I think that's all kind of well and good. I'm more interested in what your spirit tastes like. So the bottling we'll be looking at today is, I think, their Whiskey number 2, which is their peated malt, aged in ex-bourbon, finished in new virgin oak, and this is batch 3 from 2017. So pretty young spirit, I'm guessing, but we shall see what. We shall see what it tastes like then, shall we? So I guess that's pretty much about it for the waffle. Let's just introduce today's lineup. Right, okay, so we're going to kick off with the Rampur. This, like I said, is bottled at 43% and is a single Indian malt. So I think that will be an interesting place to start. The second bottling we'll be looking at is the Blackadder Raw Cask No Age Statement English Whiskey, although I believe it is 5 years old. I think it was distilled in 2011 and bottled in March of 2016. It's a single cask, as is Blackadder's raison d'etre, and it is bourbon cask B2001, bottled at the fairly small alcoholic content of 64.7, hence the water. So yes, English whiskey, you know, I love it, and I'm hoping this is going to be, and this is the thing about the English distillery, they have just such an amazing consistency of character each time. I mean, I've tasted maybe 1 or 2 bottlings I was maybe not quite so keen on, but they're American oak aged, absolutely spot on pretty much every time. The third bottling we'll be looking at is this one from the Penderyn Distillery. This is the Rich Oak Matured Single Cask bottling, cask number 161, bottled at an ABV of 59.8. Hence the water. So I don't quite know what Rich Oak actually is. I'm guessing probably it's virgin American oak, or maybe sort of first fill American oak, possibly. I don't honestly know, but it has certainly got a lovely colour, it has to be said. So one would imagine that's going to have a lot of oak character, so be interesting. Talking of oak character and lovely colours, the second bottling from the Penderyn Distillery is a single Portwood cask distilled in 2003. I think it was bottled last year, making it 13 years old, bottled at 57.3. Now, I was sent the sample and offered it by the distillery. The cask number, by the way, is PT9. Now, the only information I could find about this was that La Maison du Whisky bottled 60 bottles for their 60th anniversary from this cask at this ABV. Now, as there's no ABV on the sample, I'm guessing that this must be the remainder of the cask. So again, like I said, I'm guessing that this is at 57.3. So it will be interesting to see what that's like. I mean, I do like their standard Portwood bottling, so we'll see what the single cask bottling is like. Next one we'll be moving on to is the first of the 2 peated malts. This is, like I said, the Isford Whiskey number 2. It was, or the batch is batch number 3 of 2017. Like I said, aged in ex-American or ex-bourbon casks and finished in virgin American oak. So again, probably a fair amount of oak character, one would imagine, but you know, we shall see when we get there. And finally, we're going to look at the peated English malt. Again, this is a no age statement bottling from Blackadder, and again 5 years old, distilled in 2011, bottled in March of 2016. Single bourbon cask, number 279. So I think this is going to be a bit of a fun, if not quite alcoholic tasting. So time to kick off with a bit of Indian, I think.
чья высохла кожа, кто вечно пеняет на ведьму судьбу.
Right, okay, so let's see what the Rampur is like then, shall we? It's a nice nose. It's got an interesting sort of blend of youthfulness, relatively youthful. I mean, I'm guessing that if it's anything like the Paul John, it's going to be between about sort of 5 and 7 years old. But it's got a lovely freshness, plenty of barley, crisp fruit, and possibly the most intriguing thing about this whiskey, and certainly I mentioned that to Ben when I was tasting it with him, was it's got quite a herbal character, and reminded me a little bit of the Langerton. I mean, the herbal character is not quite so Provençal as it is with the Langerton, but there's a distinct herbally kind of character to it. There's a little bit of coffee as well. It's juicy, but it's got sort of a dry barley note as well. I like this. This is a really intriguing nose. It's a sort of whiskey that sort of demands a little bit of time and a little bit of contemplation, and it's not too expensive either, which is another nice thing. I think it's what is it, about 45, 49, something like that, I think. So we're not talking sort of like huge amounts of money, and it's nicely packaged. Not that that has much bearing on the quality of the spirit, but yeah, I think all told, I think this is a lovely nose, really, really nice. So let's see what the palate's like. Really herbal. Certainly sort of starts off lightly herbal, and the herbal character really builds. Again, it's got a nice softness, bit of crispness and an edge to it. There's some apricot, there's plenty of barley. It's got a lovely mouth-filling character, a little bit of coffee, and a slight minerality right on the finish. I think it's bottled at just about the right ABV. I don't think you want that too much more alcoholic than it is. That kind of aids the freshness. Little bit of a marriness to it, has to be said. You know, again, there is a slight youthful feel to it, but I think it's a pleasant, it's enjoyable, and certainly I think one to check out. And the nice thing about it is it's like neither. It isn't like the other two distilleries that from India. It certainly has its own character, its own quality, and it is, you know, distinctly different, which I think is really good. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good start, right? Okay, so let's move on to the unpeated English. Let's see what those gives us on this end. Intense, youthful, but not too youthful. It's got a lovely, soft, creamy barley kind of character. A little bit of oak, touch of lime, white fruits. I mean, yeah, there's a bit of an alcohol prickle, but not as much as you would expect from something bottled at this kind of ABV. It's a lovely intensity, sort of a softness. The oak is kind of quite sort of sitting in the background, just kind of adding the sort of structure to the whiskey. But it's got a lovely sweet barley note, and it's all kind of quite contained, I suppose, by the alcohol. But you get the feeling that you sort of stick a little bit of water with that, and it's just going to blossom and open up. But even so, that is a delightful nose, really, really nice. And I keep saying it, you know, the English distillery is just so consistent. I mean, you know, aged in American oak, I've not tasted a bad bottling, it has to be said. So let's see what the palate gives us. As you would expect, given the ABV, the finish is a bit short, a little bit alcoholic, but it's not bent out of shape at all. The spirit is soft and creamy and barleyed. There's apricot, apple, touch of cinnamon coming through on the middle, a little bit of wood spice, touch of oak. Again, like I said, the alcohol really dries up the finish, but the mouth is tingling, and that's just got a wonderful vibrancy and youthfulness. And this is the lovely thing about the English whiskey. It can get away with being bottled really young because it has that vibrancy and that lovely youthful intensity without being sort of overly spirity. So let's put a little drop of water in. Let's just see if the nose does indeed open out. Oh yeah, no, that is nice. It's got a real lemony sponge cake kind of character. Touch of lime, some crisp apple, peach, no, not peach, pear, sorry. It's just wonderfully aromatic and fresh and barleyed and just really enjoyable. Lovely nose. Let's see what the palate's like now. Wonderfully soft, fuller, more oak character coming through now, a little bit more creamy vanilla, still a touch of tangerine on the finish as well, a little bit of again cinnamon and pepper, possibly a little bit of pepper. Still a touch drying, but I mean, it's just such a lovely mouthful, a real intensity and softness, and yes, I know this is a relatively expensive bottle of whiskey. It's about 70 odd quid, which, you know, you think, well, for a 5-year-old whiskey, that is a lot of money. But it is a cask strength 5-year-old, nevertheless. And the quality is absolutely fantastic. So another superb bottling from Blackadder, and another damn good whiskey from the English Distillery. So, nice. Right, okay, so let's move on to the rich oak. Let's see what nose gives us on this one, shall we? There's quite a bit of oak, it has to be said, but the spirit again kind of comes through. It's got that citric freshness. There's a little bit of toffee, vanilla, plenty of barley, quite rounded. Definitely becomes more creamier as you let it sit in the glass. It's a subtle sort of toffee coffee kind of note. Yeah, I mean, and there's an edge, there's a sort of a kind of a graininess, a sort of not quite a French oak graininess, but certainly there's a tannic graininess which would seem to imply virgin oak. And you know, I think it's just really nicely balanced, actually. I think this is really classy, it's elegant. Yeah, it's got some lovely apricot, some citrus. And the oak is rich, you know, so it kind of does what it says on the tin, so to speak. So, yeah, that's a lovely nose. Let's see what the palate's like. Oh, that's a rich palate. Lot of oak, a lot of oak. Creamy, vanilla, toffee, gritty tannins. Again, kind of just gives the impression of French oak. I mean, I wonder whether they're playing around with compass box hybrid casks. Now that would be interesting. Maybe they should talk to John and get some of his refilled casks, because that has a real hybrid American French kind of character, real spiciness as well. The tongue is tingling with the obviously the alcohol enhanced spices, but still there's some lovely citrus, there's some barley. Yeah, okay, it is more kind of steered towards the oak character, but there's certainly spirit notes, and I don't think it's overtly unbalanced. I think, like I said, I think the balance has maybe shifted slightly in the towards the oak, but I mean, I like that. I think that's really impressive. Let's try a little drop of water with it. Let's see what that does to it. But I don't think you really need a drop of water with that, even though it is sort of like approaching 60-odd%. A little bit oilier now. I'm getting a bit more orange, tangerine possibly, more barley. Oak is kind of softer, less gritty. Still wonderfully aromatic, really intriguing kind of nose. But I think, you know, you're going to need to like your oak character if you're going to get on with this particular whiskey. It has to be said, but it's wonderfully soft. Loads of toffee. Let's see what the palate's like now. Really soft, really juicy and full. Less of that graininess or grainy tannic kind of character. It's a lot softer, a lot more vanilla, a lot more toffee. Wonderfully long. A little bit of barley kind of and citrus coming through on the finish. Again, I think the balance is just about right. I think it's kind of. It works. I mean, you know, they've titled it right. You know, it is a rich oak bottling. So, like I said, I think you need to like your oak character if you're going to get on with this particular whiskey. But I like it. I think it's an easy whiskey to drink. Certainly once you put a little drop of water with it, and but it's certainly got no shortage of character, shall we say. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Portwood. Let's see what this gives us. Quite porty, grapey, black sort of red grapes, touch of syrup, spice, cinnamon, pepper. Oh, it's quite visceral, it has to be said. It's really not raw, natural. It doesn't have the, say for argument's sake, Glenmorangie kind of polish. Again, it has a lovely natural kind of character, which I really, really like. I mean, yeah, I'm getting absolutely zero distillery character, no barley, no sort of citrus, anything like that. This is all about the port cask, and it's impressive, it has to be said. Wonderfully juicy, sort of crushed fruit kind of notes, and syrup and spice, and all things nice. That is a lovely nose. I mean, if you want a sort of like a winter dram, you know, just sort of sit by the fire with and all that kind of stuff, you know, bugger the bloody sherry casks. This actually hits the spot with that lovely, you know, sort of toffee, Christmas cakey kind of character. I would much prefer this to a big sherry monster, it has to be said, but like I said, very little distillery character, so you've got to, again, love your oak. But let's see what the palate gives us, shall we? That's quite drying. There's quite a lot of tan in there. But again, sort of syrup coated black red fruits, portiness, cinnamon. I am getting a bit of spirit character coming through on the finish. It has that sort of youthful, marry kind of character that I often kind of pick up on in Penderyn. Even though this is probably 13 years old, it still tastes pretty young, it has to be said. Spices are gorgeous. They really tingle on the tongue on the finish, and mingle in with that sort of slightly chocolatey tannin kind of character. Like I said, I mean, that is really, really impressive. Again, not a huge amount of distillery character, a little bit of spirit character, like I said, on the finish of the palate. But either way, I mean, that if you love Portwood matured whiskies, and you like the sort of the raw, the rawer kind of port cask finish rather than the sort of like the overtly polished kind of bottlings, then that's got your number, shall we say. Right, okay, let's move on to the Isford. Let's see what the nose gives us on this then, shall we? Interesting. Almost kind of medicinal peatiness. I mean, I'm pretty certain they don't have. Well, they might have peat bogs in Iceland. I mean, I don't bloody know. It's possible, but it's got quite a medicinal character. I'm not getting a lot of saltiness, so it's got a sort of. It's intriguing. You know, it's like, you know, you would expect medicinal kind of notes to kind of go hand in hand with briny notes, but there's not a huge amount of that. It's got a lovely freshness, a touch of smoke, a little bit of tar. I'm not getting a huge amount of distillery character. Obviously, if I'd have had bottle number 1, which was unpeated, that would have kind of like given me the obvious distillery character and something to work with. But you know what? I really like this. I think this is impressive. I mean, okay, I can live with all the Arctic water kind of marketing guff and all that kind of stuff. Because at the end of the day, this is a nice spirit. There's a little bit of lemon possibly coming through. There is a touch of barley. It's quite light. It's elegant. It's a bit delicate. I suppose if you wanted a kind of an analogy, body-wise, it certainly fits in with the lighter end of the Speyside kind of whiskies. Yet it has an almost kind of islery kind of peat note, but without the salt. So yeah, intriguing, interesting. It has to be said. Let's see what the palate's like. Ah, finally I'm getting smoke. Lovely combination of oak. I'm certainly getting the sort of grittiness of the virgin oak, along with some soft vanillins. There's a lot more oak on the palate than there is on the nose in actual fact. The peat is slightly medicinal, very gentle, very soft, a little bit of smoke, some barley. It's actually got quite a sort of an oiliness. Certainly the finish is quite oily, but again it's fairly delicate and light. It's not what you'd call a big robust kind of whiskey. It's got, like I say, it's got a delicacy to it, and yeah, maybe there is certainly a little bit more oak on the nose now after it's been kind of sat there, but yeah, you know what, I kind of like that. Like I said, the peat has got that slightly medicinally kind of character, but I don't get any saltiness, and obviously I'm guessing that the peat may well be, I don't know, maybe mainland peat. I'd expect a dryness, but then again, I'm not if this is Icelandic peat. Well, it's certainly intriguing, it has to be said, and maybe I should have done a bit more research on it. But nevertheless, I think it's a nice whiskey. It's certainly a little bit on the pricey side, but then, you know, they all are, aren't they, at the end of the day. But even I think if you bought this, you would not be disappointed. If you like your peated malts, it's got a moderate level of peat. We're not talking, you know, huge levels of peat. We're just talking about enough. Yeah, I like that. That's good. Right, okay, and finally we're on to the peated English now. Knowing what David Fitt, the distiller, said, that they tend to order in their peated malt as high as they can get it. So, you know, you're talking, I guess, initial peating levels, you know, in the high 60s. So, let's see what the nose gives us. Again, wonderful combination of spirit and peat. It has that fresh apricot and citrus, lemony kind of nose with some lovely intense peat. I mean, one of the things that and this is not a criticism, because certainly the distillery bottling does tend to be very, very peat orientated. It's kind of almost like I said, I think I've tasted it in the past and said it, has a coalillery kind of feel to it. And it's a bit like the Penderyns, that you don't get a great deal of the distillery character with the peated bottling. I suppose part of it's the price you pay for sort of playing around with peat, but this on the other hand has got some really, it's just like the unpeated with a little bit of peat. I'm certainly getting that sort of fresh citric apricots, apples kind of character with a little bit of peat, and the balance is just absolutely spot on. I must admit, it's sort of Robin obviously managed to get hold of a really well balanced cask, it has to be said. That is absolutely lovely. There's a little bit of grassiness as well, a little bit of chocolate, maybe coffee, that sort of thing, tar. Just really complex, really nice. And I mean, if you love your peated malts, then, as I do, you'll love this. This is just absolutely fantastic. Really, very, very good. And let's see what the palate's like. What sooty! It's like licking the inside of a coal skull. And for you, those of you of a certain age will remember coal scuttles. I remember my grandmother having a coal scuttle. Wow, that is intense. But I'm still getting the apricot, the apple, the citrus, the barley, really drying finish, a little bit of herbalness, a little bit of coffee. It's just, wow, that is intense but balanced and not, I mean, yes, that's heavily peated, obviously, but there's so much more going on. I mean, that is, I can still taste that sort of raw, coaly, peaty, sort of dusty, wow, love that. That is really, really impressive. Let's see what a little bit of water does to it. The peat is sort of softened off a bit, as is often the case with cask strength peated malts when you put a little bit of water with them. I'm certainly getting slightly more oily kind of barley character, a little bit more citrus. But it's become really harmonious, really, really nice. Yeah, I like this. This is, again, this is not a cheap bottling. This is, again, high end of 70 odd quid. And you're going, what, 70 odd quid for a 5-year-old? But you just have to forget about the fact that it's a 5-year-old whiskey and just go, this is a bloody good whiskey. This is really impressive. Let's see what the palate's like now. Softer. The peat is more kind of relegated to the finish, so I'm getting a little bit more oak character, a little bit more coffee, more spirit character, more barley, citrus, iodine-y, almost violety kind of Bamori kind of peat now on the finish. Wow, that's really nice. That's really impressive. I like that. Mouth-filling, oily, full, dense, peaty. Whoa, yeah, that kind of, that hits the spot. That's a great finish. Okay, so let's sum this week's episode of the show up. Well, where else on YouTube are you going to get such a an eclectic mix of whiskies in an episode of a whiskey tasting show. I mean, yeah, there are a couple of others that do one, maybe two. But does anybody else do this? No. Anyway, I don't like that. Okay, so let's sum this week's episode of the show up. Well, let's be honest, where else on YouTube are you going to get such a weird and wonderful eclectic mix of whiskies on a whiskey tasting show? Here, funnily enough. Anyway, so I think it's been a really interesting episode of the show. I mean, the English whiskies have shown how bloody good they are, to be honest with you, and how consistent the distillery is in its output. I think they're both of the whiskies are exceptionally good. Yeah, they're a bit on the expensive side, but you know, I think certainly if you bought these bottles you wouldn't be disappointed by the quality. The Rampur, yeah, I like that. I mean, it's the nice thing about it, it's not the same as the other two Indian distilleries. There is a distinct difference in quality, no, in style. I mean, the quality is the same as the other two distilleries, but I think there's a real difference in the character of the whiskey, and it's certainly not like you're going to sort of taste it and think, well, it tastes like, you know, the others. You know, it certainly doesn't. It has its own unique characteristics, so I think certainly worth looking into. The Rich Oak edition, well, yeah, I think if you like your oak, it's certainly gonna be for you. I mean, I thought it was pleasant. Yes, the character was probably slightly more towards the oak end of the spectrum, but I thought it had enough balance to just provide some interest and something other than the oak character. The Portwood, likewise, well, no, there wasn't really any balance there at all. It was all about the port cask. I mean, really intriguing. If you like that style of whiskey, I love the rawness, well, the naturalness, I suppose is probably a better word, of it wasn't polished and all that kind of stuff. It had a real natural kind of character, which I kind of like. The Isford, yeah, I kind of like that. I mean, it's sort of, you know, ignore all the marketing guff and the Antarctic water and all that kind of malarkey. You know, at the end of the day, what's actually in the bottle is very nice, and you know, I think one of these days I'll get hold of the unpeated spirit, unpeated malt that they do, and see what the distillery character is all about. So yeah, there you have it. That's this week's episode of the show in the bag. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I have absolutely no idea what the hell I'm going to be doing next week. So anyway, all that's left to say is good afternoon and good dramming.
По ночам никак не хотят